When we think about productivity, most of us imagine a mountain that looks impossible to climb. We tell ourselves stories like, I'll start tomorrow, or I just don't feel motivated enough. But here's the truth. Productivity is not about motivation, it's about momentum. Motivation is temporary, momentum is sustainable. And once you learn how to build momentum, you can transform from lazy to productive faster than you think. The first step is awareness. Laziness isn't a flaw in character, it's often the result of unclear direction. When we don't know why we're doing something, the brain resists investing energy. Think about it. When you're excited about a project you deeply care about, you don't need anyone to push you. Energy comes naturally. But when your why is blurry, your brain seeks comfort over challenge. Clarity creates energy, and without clarity, laziness becomes the default mode. The second step is to shrink the mountain. Most people fail not because the task is hard, but because they start too big. Imagine telling yourself you're going to write a book tonight or run 10 kilometers tomorrow morning after months of inactivity. The mind rejects it instantly. The trick is to make the first step so small that laziness has no excuse to resist it. Write a single sentence. Walk for 5 minutes. Start the timer for just 10 minutes of work. These small actions create micro wins, and micro wins fuel momentum. The third step is environment. Productivity doesn't live in isolation. It lives in the ecosystem you create. If your phone is buzzing every 3 minutes, if your desk is cluttered, if the people around you are draining your energy, your environment is silently pulling you back into laziness. But when you design your space to remove distractions and add cues that trigger focus, laziness has no room to survive. Surround yourself with reminders of progress, tools that make work easier, and people who inspire you. The fourth step is rhythm. Productivity is not about working nonstop. It's about working in a flow. Humans are not machines. We're not designed to be on for 12 hours straight. Instead, the most productive people know how to create cycles, bursts of focus followed by moments of recovery. Work for 25 or 50 minutes, then pause. Reset your energy, then dive back in. This rhythm transforms work from a draining chore into a sustainable practice. Finally, the fifth step is identity. Laziness disappears when productivity becomes part of who you are. It's no longer, I'm trying to be productive, but I am a productive person. Identity fuels consistency because every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. If you want to transform fast, stop asking, how can I push myself today? And start asking, who do I want to be tomorrow? The moment you see yourself as a productive person, your choices naturally align with that identity. Transformation doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. And the fastest way to go from lazy to productive is to combine clarity, small steps, the right environment, rhythm, and identity. Productivity isn't a gift some people are born with. It's a practice anyone can build starting right now. 5 keynotes of the speech, productivity begins with clarity of purpose. Without it, laziness thrives. Small steps and micro wins are the fastest way to overcome inertia. Environment shapes behavior. Design it to eliminate distractions. Sustainable productivity comes from rhythm, not nonstop effort. True transformation happens when productivity becomes part of identity. Productivity begins with clarity of purpose. Without it, laziness thrives. Most people misunderstand laziness. They assume it's about being weak-willed, careless, or unwilling to try. But if you observe carefully, laziness is rarely about a lack of ability. It is usually about a lack of clarity. When the human mind knows exactly what needs to be done and why it matters, it can summon energy from reserves you didn't even know you had. But when the purpose is vague, the brain does what it is designed to do, conserve energy and seek comfort. Laziness then isn't a flaw. It's simply the natural state when purpose is unclear. Think about times in your life when you've been effortlessly energetic. Maybe it was preparing for a trip you were excited about, playing a game you enjoyed, or working on a project you believed in. Did anyone have to push you then? Did you need motivational quotes, alarms, or constant reminders? No, the energy came naturally because the purpose was strong and obvious. You knew exactly what was waiting for you, and your actions aligned with that clarity. The opposite is also true. When you're asked to do something that feels meaningless, or when your why is hidden, your mind resists. It delays, avoids, and finds distractions. This is how laziness takes root, not as a lack of capacity, but as a lack of reason. The brain is constantly making calculations. It asks, is this worth my energy? If the answer is uncertain, it chooses rest. That is why clarity is the foundation of productivity. Without it, you can read all the self-help books in the world, set 1,000 alarms, and download countless productivity apps, yet you will still struggle to move forward. Because tools without clarity are like a car without fuel. They may look powerful, but they won't move you. Clarity transforms effort. Imagine being asked to climb a steep hill with no explanation. It feels pointless and exhausting. Now imagine the same hill, but you are told that at the top waits an opportunity that could change your life. Suddenly, the same climb feels meaningful. The slope is no less steep, your legs no less tired, but your perspective fuels you. That is what clarity does. It takes the same task and makes it feel purposeful, and when purpose is present, laziness loses its power. One of the biggest reasons people stay trapped in cycles of laziness is because they confuse tasks with purpose. A task is something you have to do, purpose is the reason behind it. Writing an essay may feel boring until you connect it to the idea of building a skill that could shape your future career. Cleaning your room may feel like a chore until you connect it to the peace and focus it will bring you when you're working on bigger goals. The shift from I have to I choose to because it matters is a shift from laziness to productivity. This is why some of the most productive people in the world are not necessarily the most disciplined in the traditional sense. They are the most connected to their purpose. Their clarity eliminates the need for constant willpower because they are pulled forward by meaning, not pushed forward by force. They don't waste time asking, should I do this? Because the answer is already clear. The question has been replaced by commitment. So how do we build this clarity in our own lives? The first step is to ask better questions. Instead of asking, what do I need to do today? Start asking, why does this matter for my future? Instead of asking, how can I stop being lazy? Ask, what goal excites me enough to make me move? These questions direct the brain toward purpose, and purpose creates energy. The second step is to write it down. Our minds are full of noise, and clarity thrives when it is externalized. When you write your goals and reasons clearly, you create a compass for your actions. The third step is to revisit and refine that clarity often, because purpose is not fixed, it evolves as you do. Clarity is the antidote to laziness because it shifts the conversation. It transforms productivity from something you feel forced to chase into something you are naturally drawn toward. Without clarity, even the simplest task feels heavy. With clarity, even the hardest challenge feels possible. And when you understand this principle, you realize that productivity is not about pushing harder. It is about seeing clearer. Small steps and micro wins are the fastest way to overcome inertia. Laziness is not usually about a lack of desire. It's about the weight of starting. The beginning always feels heavier than the journey itself. When a task looks massive in your head, your brain instinctively chooses avoidance. It whispers, this is too much, too overwhelming, too tiring, and so you put it off. But what most people don't realize is that the cure for laziness is not a giant leap. It is the tiniest possible step, repeated until it builds momentum. Momentum is the secret force behind productivity. Think of a train at rest. It takes tremendous energy to move the first few inches, but once it's in motion, the same train that resisted movement now glides forward with far less effort. The same principle applies to human behavior. The hardest part is not the hours of work ahead, but the first few seconds of beginning. If you can overcome the resistance of starting, the rest often takes care of itself. And the way to overcome that resistance is by making the first step so small that your brain has no reason to resist. This is where micro wins become powerful. A micro win is any action so small that it seems almost laughable, yet it carries the power to shift your state. For example, instead of telling yourself to clean your entire room, you commit to picking up just one object. Instead of deciding to run 5 kilometers, you commit to putting on your running shoes and stepping outside. Instead of demanding yourself to write 10 pages, you sit down and write just one sentence. These micro wins look insignificant, but they trigger a psychological shift. They tell your brain, I've started. And once you start, the inertia begins to fade. The beauty of micro wins is that they bypass perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the biggest drivers of procrastination. People delay starting because they imagine the finished product in their head and feel crushed by the gap between where they are and where they want to be. But when you shrink the goal to the smallest action possible, you silence that inner critic. You're not writing a perfect essay, you're writing one sentence. You're not transforming your health overnight, you're drinking one glass of water. You're not rebuilding your entire career, you're sending one email. And once that small action is taken, it opens the door to the next. Neuroscience backs up. Every time you achieve a small task, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical of reward. This creates a positive feedback loop. You feel good about progress even if it's small, and that good feeling fuels the desire to keep going. That is why starting small often leads to accomplishing far more than you originally planned. You sit down to write one sentence, and suddenly you find yourself writing a full page. You promise yourself 10 minutes of studying, and an hour later you're still engaged. The micro win wasn't the end goal, it was the spark that lit the fire. Many people underestimate the compound power of these tiny actions. They believe transformation requires drastic overnight change. But big leaps are unstable. They exhaust you quickly, and when the energy runs out, you crash back into laziness. Small steps, however, are sustainable. They accumulate over time until the results look massive. Think about how water erodes stone, not through force, but through consistent small movements repeated endlessly. In the same way, consistent micro wins transform you, often faster than trying to force giant progress. Consider also how this principle applies to habits. Habits are simply behaviors repeated often enough to become automatic. And the easiest way to form a habit is to start with the smallest version possible. If you want to build the habit of reading, begin with a single page a day. If you want to meditate, start with just 2 minutes. If you want to exercise, commit to 5 push-ups. What matters is not the scale of the action, but the consistency. Once the small version becomes part of your identity, scaling up feels natural and effortless. Small steps also reframe how you see productivity. You stop measuring progress by giant milestones and instead learn to celebrate progress in motion. This mindset keeps you motivated because success no longer feels distant. It feels immediate. You see proof of progress every single day, and this keeps laziness from creeping back in. Productivity, then, is not about heroic bursts of effort. It's about steady progress fueled by micro wins. The truth that laziness is not conquered by force. It is conquered by tricking the mind into moving gently and consistently. And once you get moving, the energy you thought you didn't have reveals itself. Small steps and micro wins are not just a strategy for starting, they are the foundation of lasting transformation. Environment shapes behavior. Design it to eliminate distractions. We often believe productivity is purely a matter of self-control, but the truth is that human behavior is deeply influenced by surroundings. No matter how determined you are, if your environment is full of temptations, distractions, and constant noise, your willpower will eventually wear down. Laziness thrives in environments that make it easy to avoid effort. Productivity thrives in environments that remove friction and create focus. In other words, the context you live and work in silently directs your actions more than your conscious decisions do. Think about it. If your phone is always within arm's reach, buzzing with notifications, how long can you resist checking it? If your desk is cluttered with papers, snacks, and random objects, how long before your attention scatters? If you're surrounded by people who prefer procrastination and comfort over action, how long before you adopt the same rhythm? Your environment is not neutral. It's either working for you or against you. And the fastest way to shift from lazy to productive is to design that environment in a way that pulls you toward action instead of resistance. Distraction is the enemy of focus. Laziness often hides behind distraction, giving you a way to feel busy without being productive. Scrolling endlessly, switching between tasks, or pretending to multitask gives the illusion of activity while keeping you from meaningful progress. The environment fuels this by offering too many easy escapes. But when you remove those cues, you make laziness harder to access. For example, leaving your phone in another room while you work makes checking it less convenient. Teddying your workspace signals to your brain that it's time to focus. Even something as simple as adjusting lighting, sitting in a quiet corner, or facing away from distractions can reshape your mental state. Environment also provides triggers for habits. Our brains are wired to associate certain spaces with certain behaviors. If your bed is the place where you scroll your phone for hours, then trying to suddenly make it a place of focused work is nearly impossible. But if you dedicate one space exclusively to working, your brain begins to associate that location with productivity. Over time, just being in that space primes you for action. This is why routines tied to physical environments are so powerful. They eliminate the need for constant willpower by letting the space itself act as a silent motivator. Consider how elite performers across fields use environment to their advantage. Athletes design training spaces that eliminate distractions and remind them of their goals. Writers create quiet corners where everything signals creativity. Successful entrepreneurs organize their digital environment by filtering notifications, structuring their calendars, and setting boundaries around communication. None of these people rely solely on raw discipline. They engineer environments that make productivity easier and laziness harder. Another powerful aspect of environment is the people around you. Human behavior is contagious. If you spend time around individuals who procrastinate, complain, or waste time, you will unconsciously mirror their habits. But if you surround yourself with people who value focus, growth, and consistency, you will rise to meet that standard. Environment is not only physical, it's also social. Choosing carefully who you spend time with is one of the strongest ways to reinforce or weaken your productivity. The digital environment is equally important. The modern world floods us with information, and without intentional design, it can overwhelm and paralyze us. Laziness often comes from overstimulation when the brain, tired of processing constant noise, chooses avoidance. By curating your digital space, limiting notifications, organizing your workspace, decluttering files, and setting intentional boundaries, you create mental clarity. Digital minimalism isn't about restriction, it's about freedom from the noise that keeps you stuck. Some people believe they must wait for motivation to change their behavior, but in reality, changing the environment often changes behavior faster than motivation ever could. For example, if you want to eat healthier, placing fruits within reach and removing junk food from sight makes the decision easier. If you want to study more, leaving your books open and ready on the desk signals your brain to begin. If you want to exercise, laying out your workout clothes the night before primes your morning. These simple adjustments reduce the friction between intention and action, giving laziness no space to intervene. Ultimately, environment is a silent teacher. It tells you what to focus on, what to avoid, and what is possible. A messy, distracting, energy-draining environment whispers laziness. A clear, intentional, focused environment whispers productivity. And the most powerful truth is this: you don't have to fight laziness directly. You can outsmart it by reshaping the spaces you live and work in. When the environment supports your goals, effort feels lighter, focus feels natural, and productivity becomes less about willpower and more about alignment. Sustainable productivity comes from rhythm, not nonstop effort. Too often, people equate being productive with being endlessly busy, as if the number of hours worked directly equals the quality of progress made. But human beings are not machines. We are not built to run at maximum output without pause. When we push ourselves into constant, uninterrupted work, the result is not more productivity, but burnout, exhaustion, and eventually collapse back into laziness. The secret is not to work harder for longer, but to find a rhythm that balances focus and recovery. Productivity at its best is like music. It is not created by nonstop sound, but by the flow between notes and pauses. When you look at the most effective individuals across any field, athletes, artists, thinkers, or entrepreneurs, you will notice they all understand the importance of rhythm. Athletes do not train at maximum intensity all day long. They build cycles of training, recovery, and performance. Musicians do not play without rest, They create art through patterns of sound and silence. In the same way, humans produce their best work when they alternate between periods of deep focus and deliberate rest. Without rhythm, work becomes chaos. With rhythm, work becomes sustainable. The science of focus supports this. The brain has natural ultradian rhythms, cycles of high energy and focus that last about 90 minutes, followed by dips where attention wanes. Trying to force yourself to stay focused for hours without a break goes against the biology of how the brain operates. Instead, working in focused intervals, then allowing recovery, aligns with how the mind is designed. This is why techniques like the Pomodoro method or the 50-at-10 principle work so well. They are not magic tricks. They are simply structures that respect the brain's natural rhythm. Without rhythm, laziness becomes more tempting. When you try to push through fatigue, the brain looks for relief and distractions become irresistible. Scrolling your phone, wandering aimlessly, or giving up entirely feels easier than grinding against exhaustion. But when you honor rhythm, rest is no longer avoidance. It is part of the process. You know you have scheduled recovery, so you can give your full focus during work periods without fear of burning out. Laziness doesn't creep in because your brain isn't desperately begging for escape. It is important to recognize that rhythm is not only about minutes and hours, it's also about seasons of life. There are times when pushing harder is necessary and times when pulling back is wiser. Creativity often comes in bursts, and trying to force inspiration when the well is empty only leads to frustration. Rest, exploration, and downtime are not wasted. They are fuel for the next surge of productivity. Farmers know the soil must rest between harvests. Nature itself runs in cycles of growth and renewal. When we fight these natural rhythms by demanding constant output, we work against ourselves. Another aspect of rhythm is variety. Doing the same kind of task for hours can drain energy faster than alternating between different types of work. Shifting from analytical tasks to creative ones, or from solitary focus to collaborative discussions, provides the brain with stimulation while preventing fatigue from building too heavily in one area. Rhythm is not only about rest, but also about flow between different states of engagement. It keeps productivity alive by preventing stagnation. We also need to redefine what rest truly means. Rest is not simply doing nothing or numbing the mind with distractions. True rest is intentional recovery. It could be a walk outside, breathing exercises, listening to music, or even short naps. It could be as simple as stepping away from your desk to reset your perspective. Rest that recharges you restores energy for the next cycle of focus. Many people confuse distraction with rest, but the difference is clear. Distractions leave you feeling emptier. True rest leaves you feeling ready again. When you begin to build rhythm into your work, something powerful happens. Productivity stops being a fight. You no longer drag yourself to your task with dread because you know the process will not consume you. You know there will be space to breathe, space to recover, and that your effort will be balanced. Work stops being an endless wall to climb and becomes a pattern you can sustain. In that pattern, you find flow. And in flow, laziness has no space to grow. The paradox is that by working less in each burst, you often accomplish more overall. Because each session of focus is sharper, more intentional, and more effective, the results accumulate faster than if you were dragging through endless hours of half attention. Productivity becomes about quality, not sheer quantity. And when you experience this, you realize that rhythm is not a compromise. It is the true path to lasting performance. True transformation happens when productivity becomes part of identity. Many people try to fight laziness by forcing themselves to act differently for a day or a week, but short bursts of willpower rarely lead to lasting change. Willpower fades, motivation fluctuates. External reminders can only do so much. What creates lasting productivity is not forcing yourself into action temporarily, but reshaping how you see yourself. When productivity becomes part of your identity, it stops being something you chase and starts being something you naturally embody. Identity is the strongest driver of behavior because human beings are wired to act in alignment with who they believe they are. If someone identifies as an athlete, they don't wake up every day debating whether to exercise. It's simply part of who they are. If someone identifies as a writer, they don't need to fight themselves to put words on paper. It's what writers do. The same principle applies to productivity. As long as you think of yourself as lazy but trying to change, you will always be at war with yourself. But the moment you shift your identity to, I am a productive person, your actions naturally begin to align with that belief. The trap many fall into is focusing only on outcomes instead of identity. They say, I want to finish this project, or I want to get better grades, or I want to be more organized. These are goals, and goals are important, but goals without identity are fragile. You may reach a single milestone, but then you slip back into old patterns because you never changed the deeper story of who you are. Identity-driven productivity is different. It doesn't just focus on finishing one project. It focuses on becoming the type of person who consistently finishes what they start. And when your identity shifts, results become inevitable. The key to building a new identity is through repeated action. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to become. When you sit down and study instead of scrolling, that's a vote for being a disciplined learner. When you exercise instead of skipping, that's a vote for being someone who values health. When you write one page instead of procrastinating, that's a vote for being a writer. The more votes you cast, the stronger your new identity becomes. Over time, the evidence piles up and your mind begins to believe the story you are telling through action. What makes this so powerful is that you no longer need to rely on fragile bursts of motivation. Instead of saying, I'll work if I feel like it, your identity says, I'll work because this is who I am. Identity makes productivity automatic. It reduces friction because you no longer argue with yourself. You don't waste energy negotiating between the lazy self and the productive self. You have decided who you are, and your choices flow from that decision. Of course, identity shifts don't happen overnight. They are built step by step. At first, you may not fully believe the new identity. You might say, I want to be a productive person, but I've been lazy for so long. That's normal. The shift begins with adopting the mindset of becoming, not already being. You don't have to immediately say, I am productive. You can begin with, I am becoming a productive person, or I am learning to be consistent. These small shifts in language matter because they move your self-story forward instead of keeping it stuck in the past. Another important part of identity is the environment and community that reinforce it. If you want to embody productivity, surround yourself with people who already live that identity. Their habits, values, and standards will shape yours. Even your language and mindset shift when you are around people who expect more from themselves and from you. On the other hand, if you stay in an environment that constantly excuses laziness or glorifies procrastination, it will be difficult to fully embody a new identity. Identity is personal, but it is also social. Identity also creates resilience. When challenges arise, people who only rely on motivation often give up because the obstacle feels too heavy. But those who have built identity don't quit easily because the setback doesn't fit their self-image. For example, if you miss one workout, but your identity is, I'm an athlete, you see it as a small break, not a collapse. You return naturally to the routine. Identity anchors you through failure because it tells you, this is who I am, and setbacks don't erase that. The most transformative shift happens when you stop asking, how can I push myself to be productive today? And instead ask, who do I want to be tomorrow? That question moves you from temporary effort to permanent evolution. Once you decide who you want to be, every small choice becomes an expression of that identity. Over time, you no longer force productivity. It becomes natural because it is simply you living in alignment with yourself. And when that happens, laziness no longer defines you. Your identity does. When we talk about moving from lazy to productive, it's easy to believe it requires some extraordinary force, a sudden burst of discipline, or a dramatic life change. But what we've explored together shows that transformation is not about extremes. It's about building momentum through clarity, small steps, supportive environments, sustainable rhythms, and a powerful identity. Each of these elements works together to make productivity not a struggle, but a natural outcome. Clarity gives your mind a reason to act. Without it, laziness thrives, but with it, energy flows naturally. Small steps and micro wins make starting effortless and build momentum until progress feels unstoppable. The environment you design shapes your behavior, silently pulling you either toward laziness or toward action. And when you take control of that environment, you make productivity easier than distraction. Rhythm keeps your work sustainable, reminding you that real productivity isn't about burning out, but about flowing between focus and recovery. And finally, identity locks the transformation in place. Once you see yourself as a productive person, your actions follow naturally, and laziness no longer fits the story of who you are. The journey from lazy to productive doesn't happen in one giant leap. It happens in a series of choices. Each choice is a vote for the person you want to become. And the more votes you cast, the clearer and stronger your identity becomes. Productivity stops being something you force and becomes something you live. The truth is, transformation is not about working harder. It's about working smarter with intention, with clarity, and with rhythm. So the question you must leave with is not, can I become productive? But rather, am I ready to design my life in a way where productivity is the natural outcome? Because the answer is yes, you can. And it begins the moment you choose to align your purpose, your actions, your environment, your rhythm, and your identity. That choice, repeated daily, is how you move from lazy to productive. Not slowly, but faster than you ever imagined.